So one of the challenges that I have with working with realtors is that they tend to not think of themselves as being a business owner. They look at themselves as being a hobby. And so
Yeah.
that means that they don't always bring in and follow some of the best business practices.
Hey friends, I'm Rosemary Lewis, your homegirl, and I'm so excited that you are here. I do not care what it looks like on Instagram or HGTV. This whole being a realtor thing is not for the faint at heart. In 2017, I quit my job as a teacher to follow my real estate dreams and quickly found myself overwhelmed and struggling. Fast forward to today. Not only have I been recognized as one of the leaders in our industry, I have actually grown a business that I absolutely love. I don't care if you're a brand new agent trying to figure out how to get started or a veteran feeling overwhelmed and just stuck. I was just like you, and I totally get it. Many times I wish there was someone that I could just talk to about all the challenges I was facing. And that is why I created this space just for you. Like best friends do, I'm giving you all the tea related to navigating and thriving in these real estate streets. If I can do it, guess what? That's proof that you can too. Everything's better with friends, so let's succeed together. Welcome to the Real Estate Bestie Podcast. Hey besties, I know. I always say it is a special episode, but this one truly is because I have a good friend here who is going to help get us all the way together financially. Her name is Twilla Walton, and I have invited her to come to the podcast to talk about tax preparation and accounting. So just a little bit of how this podcast came about. You all have heard me say before that there are so many transitions that we need to make when you become a real estate agent. And quite honestly, for a lot of us besties, this is a second career. We are used to punching a clock. We're used to being W-2 earners. And now, my oh my, not only do I have to figure out how to run my own business, but what does that look like in terms of accounting and taxes and all of those things? And it is indeed a shift. So Twilla is going to just help give us some insight, some things that we need to think about. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome, Twilla.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, tell the besties a little bit about who you are, what you do for business, where you're located, just a little commercial, if you will.
Okay, fantastic. My name is Twilla Walton, and I'm the owner of Walton CPA, and we are based out of Plano, Texas. And we are a little bit of a niche practice in that we work mostly with business owners. And so what we do is we provide our business owners with a lot of information about how to run their business and how to manage their taxes and tax preparation. So one of the challenges that I have with working with realtors is that they tend to not think of themselves as being a business owner. They look at themselves as being a hobby. And so that means that they don't always bring in and follow some of the best business practices. A good example is making sure that you've got a business bank account and a business credit card, and that your personal transactions are completely segregated. So that makes it a whole lot easier to put together your tax records that you're going to need for your tax planning. And then from there, it's, what are some of the other things that you need to know? And so anytime somebody comes in and they're that first-time business owner, there's always a lot of questions about what's deductible. What kind of records do I need to be keeping on hand? How am I going to be taxed? Because it's going to be very different from anything they've ever had in the past. How am I going to know what I owe to the IRS? How am I going to make those payments? What kind of tax strategies are out there? And there's just a lot of questions. And so, we see new business owners, new realtors come in, and they're just really not sure, and they need a lot of guidance to help them make that transition. Like I said, the biggest part of it is starting to change that mindset from being an employee to you run a business, and it's going to be very different. You're going to have to do a lot of things that you've never done in the past, and you don't know what you don't know. So the biggest piece of advice I have is getting with somebody who can start to help you answer those questions as soon as possible. because it's a lot easier to do that up front than maybe 18 months after the fact when we're trying to do a tax return and we have to tell you you owe a lot of money and you weren't expecting that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just back up because you just in the first in your intro, you gave so much information. And I want to just be completely transparent. And you and I have had very detailed conversations just about even my mindset, right? And for a lot of us, just even the thought of taxes and finances and like we want to make the money, but appropriating it, like not having someone who is separating your tax liability for you as we did at our previous job, that can feel so overwhelming. And I do think like I even think about it like get on the scale, right? Like at some point you have to just man up and just say, okay, what is the first step? And when you make that first step, then it can feel a little naked, right? When you're looking at your finances and then when you're inviting somebody in. But I can tell you from experience, I wish I would have done so many things ahead of time. So what would you say to that person? I love how you said that first time business owner. We always talk about first time home buyers, but that first time business owner, let's talk about the person who's just getting started, right? So they probably have a one leg up on us who are already in production, but they feel like I don't even make enough money to have a conversation. Like I haven't gotten going yet. What advice would you give them on things that they want to do now, like habits they want to implement from the start so that they're not course correcting later on?
So obviously the first one is segregating out your business transactions, getting those business bank accounts and a credit card. The next one is going to make sure that you understand how you're going to be taxed. So most realtors are going to be taxed as a sole proprietor, which means that all their revenue and their expenses are going to be reported on their personal tax return. They're going to be paying self-employment taxes in addition to income taxes on their personal tax return. So they need to understand how that's going to look like for them. So it's not unusual for somebody to come in and on their real estate income, they might be paying taxes of 30 to 35% because it's a combination of income taxes and self-employment taxes. So knowing that up front starts to help you plan for how much you're going to owe to the IRS later. And it's going to be more than what you were accustomed to paying as an employee. So understanding how the system works. And then the next one is going to be understanding what things you can take as a deduction to reduce your tax liability. So auto expenses, office and home, health insurance, retirement, marketing materials. There's a whole list of things that might be things that are deductible that you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping track of those expenses because they're going to help you manage your tax liability later on down the road.
So here's my question. For the person who, like their taxes have been so simple that they could just go and get the little kid at Sam's Club or HR Block, like this is over their head, but they also don't even know, like, well, how do I choose a tax professional? Like, what are the questions that I should be asking? I'm supposed to figure out all of these things about my tax liability and what's taxable and what's deductible, but where do I even start to get this information?
That's a great question. So H&R Block, TurboTax, some of those types of tax preparer systems, that works really good for somebody who's an employee. Pretty much all of your tax documents, they're given to you. You're not having to go out and calculate it. So that's a very simple tax scenario. But when you become a self-employed business owner, now you've got a whole new level of complication. And so H&R Block and some of these other ones, they may not work with a lot of people like that. And also the other thing is a lot of them are they're strictly tax preparation. They're not there to give you advice or direction or help you make decisions. They're just a tax preparer. You bring in your stuff, you give it to them, they take what you've given them and they put it on a tax return, and that's the end of the service. So when you become a small business, especially when you're a brand new owner, you're going to need a little bit more hand holding. And so you need to be looking for somebody who does services beyond just tax preparation. And you're going to want to look for somebody who works with a lot of businesses. So they're used to working with businesses. They've got a system. They know how this all works. And it's going to be somebody who's going to want to sit down and spend some time with you to do some education with you. The best way to find somebody like that is just ask for referrals. Who is other people working? Go and take a look at their credentials. And so credentials vary a lot from one person to the other. You know, you can be a tax preparer and have no education, no training, no nothing. Or you might be an enrolled agent, which is somebody who's passed a test with the IRS on tax principles. Or maybe they're a CPA, or maybe they're an attorney doing all of this. We all have different skill sets and different strengths. So you're going to want to look for somebody who's used to working with a business, who does a lot of advisory work with businesses, who's going to do the education part of it.
No, that's good to know. I did not realize, but it's funny as you say it, I didn't realize that a tax preparer does not need any education. But then I think about, like, I'm from South Side of Chicago. How many people are like, oh yeah, I do taxes. I'm like, really? Do you? But that makes sense now. Like, you don't have to have a certain credential. And sometimes we just assume that the person or the people that we've used have that education and that training. So that is a good question to ask. And even what you said about looking to make sure that the person that we are selecting is going to educate us, I think that is huge, especially like that's what we do as real estate agents. We are here to educate our clients on the buying and selling. And what I'm equating it to is I think about how many times I'm in front of, a first-time home buyer or somebody transitioning, and there are so many unknowns on the homeowner side that they are literally needing to trust us. And I kind of feel that when it comes to, like, first being honest with yourself about how you're managing your finances. And the reason why we're having this podcast is that I think a lot of times we just don't know what we don't know. But at some point, you just can't use it. Like IRS is not taking ignorance, like, hey, I didn't know, as an excuse as to why your books are not in order. So this is a really great topic. What are some different, like, mistakes? You started to talk about them, but what are some mistakes that, in addition to commingling the funds, mistakes that you see business owners making continually that are probably easy fixes if they just tackle them?
Probably auto expenses. The number one issue I have with all business owners, not just new ones, is if you're using your personal vehicle for business, then you're going to need to have a mileage log. And for a realtor, their office is in the car. They rack up a lot of miles. And if you're ever audited, the very first thing that an IRS agent is going to ask for is going to be that mileage log. And so that log is, where did you start your business trip? Where did you end? Who are you going to see? What was the purpose of that? And it's a big task for a realtor. And so my recommendation is to use some sort of app to help track your mileage. So I use an app called MileIQ, and it automatically records all of my trips. And so all I have to do at the end of every month is go in and fill some of the blanks so that I know if I'm ever audited, I already have my mileage log all ready to go. And it's also one of the biggest tasks to get your annual stuff ready for tax preparation. If you're using an app and keeping track of that all year long, it's already done. When it's time to do your tax return. You just run a report for the year, you hand it over to your tax preparer, and you're done.
So for the mileage, like, how detailed, because I even know that they're, like, from my tax preparer having conversations, I've learned, like, I would think, oh, cool, I drove from my house to my office. And it's like, yeah, that's not, that's commuting, and that's not business. So how do you even, I guess you go back to asking, like, what is actually allowable? So I would assume, like, us going, like, to a business meeting, or us going from showing to showing, appointments, those are the types of things that we would be marking as business travel?
Correct. So, across the board is like, where are you going, and is there a business purpose for this trip? And that could be a pretty broad statement. So, again, If you're doing listings or your showings and you're taking prospective buyers around a house, clearly that's business.
Yep.
It could also be any of your marketing activities, whether you're at a networking meeting or, hey, you have to go pick up signs that you're going to put in front of these houses. That's a business mileage trip too. Anything that's related to your business that it's a reasonable purpose, something that a realtor normally does.
What about going to get my hair done if I talk to my hairdresser about real estate while I'm there?
So, nice try. If the primary purpose for you being there is to get your hair done, then that's a personal expenditure and wouldn't even be considered to be a business deduction, even though you had a business discussion while you were there, but it does look to the primary purpose of it.
Okay.
Like I said, business mileage, the other thing you talked about earlier is where does it start and where does it stop? If you've got an office, your business mileage starts when you leave the office. If you're going from your house to the office, that is considered commuting and that's not a business trip.
But what about if I go from my office to my house, commuting as well?
It's commuting as well.
But if I stop at an appointment on the way?
So if you stop on your way from the appointment on your way home, it's business mileage from the office to your appointment. But when you leave that appointment and you go home, then it becomes commuting.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked, and I'm being so technical, is that I do a great deal of, like literally today, after we are done with this call, I am going to a listing appointment in my neighborhood because I actually do a lot of business exactly where I live. So even when I'm doing my mileage, I'm like, I hope that they know, like, but I mean, I'll have the things to back up to say when the appointment was set and all that. But yeah, it can get so specific, and it was eye-opening to me because there were a lot of things, y'all. I started off, I had a CPA tax preparer, but it was that education piece was the part that was not as clearly identified. But I cannot even blame her because me and my husband are raggedy with the way we would get the information to her. But there were a lot of things that I was classifying as business because I was using like QuickBooks or something like that it really wasn't. As I become more educated, it's both freeing, but I felt real naked for a long time. Like, oh my Lord, what is happening here?
Yeah. Step one is keeping a log of any kind, because the majority just don't. They don't even think about it. And honestly, it's a tedious activity for a realtor to do it, but it's really important because your auto expenses are probably going to be one of your biggest expenses and deductions on your tax return.
Got it. Okay, so we've talked about the person who's brand new. You often see mistakes with the auto expenses and tracking, and we have the MileIQ was what your recommendation is. That is actually what I use. Y'all recommended that I use it. I am working on getting more detail where I'm not like, oh, darn it, like, let me fill out all these miles, but I'm getting much better. What would you say, like transparently, to the person who is like, this, I'm in over my head. I feel so far behind. Like, I haven't filed. I don't know what to do, where they're not continuing to dig that hole for themselves. Like, what would your loving feedback be for that person who knows that it's raggedy and they just don't even know where to get started to get it back on track?
Don't procrastinate. Let's get it done sooner than later because you are just digging a hole. And if you owe taxes, you are accumulating interest and penalties on that the longer you wait. And, from us, we see a lot of raggedy clients come in. We're used to it. And so, that's that educational process of what can you do better? How can you organize your documents and get it to us so that it becomes a much more efficient and less painful process. But, it's just, we have to start somewhere with something. And even if it's raggedy, it may not be perfect, but close enough is better than not at all. And so
and waiting is only gonna, like you say, it's gonna just not even dig a bigger hole, but cause additional stress and anxiety. And it's like, you know what? No, get with a proper professional so that you can get your stuff together.
Right. And eventually the IRS is going to start sending you letters. And if they're assessing and calculating the taxes owed, it's never going to be in your favor. So you're better off to you take by the horns and and figure out what your deductions are and have somebody put together that tax return to put you in the best financial position. And you really don't want the IRS to be chasing you down for money. That's stressful.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. What about this? I know we talked a little bit about, flipping the coin, like tax strategy, because there are different strategies that you can use to put you, it's not like you're cheating the system, but again, you don't know what you don't know. So what advice would you give for agents in terms of pre-planning some tax strategy on how they're allocating their funds, where they can get the maximum deductions? But still, y'all, you don't want to deduct too much where you can't go out and buy the stuff you really need to, right? Claim a
Right.
loan from your business. But what are some strategy tips and maybe even some retirement planning tips that you would give agents?
Yeah, retirement is always one of the first things that we start talking about, which is making sure you're setting aside money. These days you've got lots of retirement options out there, and they may be a tax deduction for you now, so help save you money now, or maybe you decide that you want to go with something that's more like a Roth, which won't be a tax deduction now, but it'll never be taxed again. So there's a lot of different ways to do retirement, and there's no right way for any one person, but everybody needs to be thinking about how are you saving money for retirement and how does it fit into your tax strategy. And it's not just tax, it's retirement, it's wealth accumulation. So retirement is a big, big, big one on that list. The other one that deserves some time is going to be talking about health insurance. How are you managing your health insurance? And if you're a self-employed sole proprietor, your health insurance can be deductible on your return as well. So we want to make sure you're getting the benefit of those deductions if you're eligible for them.
No, absolutely. And even when it comes to that, like, y'all, these are, again, all of the things that I don't think we necessarily think about. I know for sure, like, just speaking very transparently, I was an agent for about a year before I had proper health insurance, right? You do all of these different things just trying to figure it out. But it's really like when I figured out, like, Rosemary, you are running a business. And if you are not managing this like it's a business, and every day I get just a little 1% better, it's definitely, definitely not perfect. But you have to rip the Band-Aid off and actually take ownership on how you are managing your finances, how you are planning for retirement, y'all. When you stop working, you no longer have this 401k, and then you think to yourself like, oh, I'll add it next time or I'll add it next year, and 10 years will go by. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not looking to be chasing commissions when I'm 70 and 80 years old. So having some plans and action steps that you're putting in place right now in order to achieve that is next level.
Right. And so a lot of times what we do is like, we're going to put together a strategic methodical process for the retirement plan. So what we have, a lot of people come in, they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to fund my retirement when I file my return. And they're just going to write this big check. Well, if they haven't planned to write that check, when it's time to write the check, they're not going to have the money, so they're not going to do it. So we look for options to systematically throughout the year set that money aside so that it's available, or go ahead and fund some of these accounts as you go through the year, kind of like a paycheck. If you take and you put around a certain dollar amount into that retirement account every month, then you don't have to worry about having a lump sum when you file the return. It's already taken care of. But if you wait, you're probably not going to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is such a good conversation, and I'm just so grateful for you to have it with us because, again, I truly believe that a lot of times people just don't know what they don't know. And us getting ahead of, this proper planning, what I hear you saying is we need to, be seeking out not only a tax professional, but someone who is in accounting, someone who is familiar with small business and small business owners, and having some strategy around not only our taxable, our tax income, but also planning for future healthcare and all of these other things, and just rip the Band-Aid off, girls.
Absolutely.
Yes. Twila, if someone wants to reach you, like what areas are you serving? If they want to have a conversation with you, how can they get in contact with your company?
Absolutely. So the best way to reach out to us is just going to call our main phone number, which is going to be 972-200-7335. And from there, we'll get you connected with somebody and have that in-depth conversation about what they need and how we can serve them. And they'll just go from that point on.
Okay, perfect. And y'all, we will go ahead and I'm going to link both Twila's website and her number in the description box. Exactly where you're listening to this podcast. And do you have any like parting piece of advice or, that person who like literally their palms are sweating just listening to this conversation? Anything you want to leave them with?
So, you kind of alluded to this earlier is like what you guys do, you go out and you sell houses and that's how you make your money. And that's what you like to do. You're not specialized in taxes. It's not making you comfortable. That's what we do. So the more that you can get with somebody who's going to do a good job for you and get that off of your plate, you get that peace of mind, the better you're going to feel. So the sooner you can do it, the better off it'll be.
I love it. I love it. Well, besties, I hope that this was helpful. Listen, do me a favor and go ahead and literally hit the share button. Share this with your real life real estate bestie, because we don't want anybody out here just upside down and not knowing, right? Knowledge is power. And it is so important that we are not only educating you on the Real Estate Bestie podcast, but we are sharing this knowledge with our other real estate besties. And that's what I got for you. Give us a 5-star review, and I cannot wait to talk to you next week. Love you so much. Bye, besties. If you enjoyed this episode and you have a real life bestie that you think it would resonate with, y'all, do me a favor. Go ahead and hit that share button, because you know what? We are better together. Make sure you share the podcast, and I appreciate your reviews. I appreciate you giving me 5 stars more than you know. I'll talk to you next week.